Greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is doing well. Guys, it is Saturday once again, and that only means one thing. 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, our live stream, Saturday Nightmares, live from upstate New York. Guys, we have a lot of fun talking experiences, theories. It is honestly unlike any other live stream in the cryptid paranormal research community on YouTube. The community in the chat is truly amazing. Friends have been forged there. It is just an amazing group of people. And like I said, we have a lot of fun. I hope to see you all there, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, before we jump into today's upload, a couple of quick links. As many may know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons. Narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And now I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? To start the day off right, part 1 and 2 of an absolutely chilling account out of a national park from a park ranger. Let's jump into it. Right, so today's upload comes to us from a gentleman who reached out. He was introduced to the channel via another subscriber, friend of his, and he had an experience 26 years ago. He didn't just stumble upon Dogman or cryptids or any kind of mysterious goings on. He has been aware that these creatures exist for quite some time. Periodically talks to his wife about what had gone on. Was aware of some channels on YouTube. Never felt like reaching out to them. He was on the verge of reaching out to a couple of them. I was one of them, and then one of his buddies had suggested reaching out to me because he was a subscriber of the channel. So his name's Patrick, and his experience happened in an area called Lincoln County, Wyoming. Now, there is a large national park in that region, and it's the Grand Teton National Park. Well, there's actually a smaller park just south of it, and it's called the Bridger Teton National Park. They are not the same park, even though they are sort of connected. They are not. There are two different parks. His experience, or what he witnessed, occurred in a valley in Lincoln County, in between this two mountains called Dead Man Mountain, and the other was Middle Ridge South. And Middle Ridge South eventually does connect to the Grand Teton. His experience happened in 1999. So I'm going to share with you, feed you guys the information and experience that he shared with me during our 40-minute conversation. And hopefully, if he can find some time today, he's going to share a little more of the experience, because he had sent me an email. Google seldom, or for some reason, doesn't send me all of my emails. And he had waited for a response and then sent a second one after his buddy told him, hey, did he respond to you? And he said no. And he said, well, he has an issue with his Gmail. Send him another one. And if he doesn't, I'll send him one, and we'll figure out a way of you sharing this. So by the time I ended up getting in touch with him today, he had about 10 minutes to talk to me before he had to get into his truck and drive a half an hour to go to his kids from school. So we had a 40-minute conversation. Really great guy. 21 years old, 1999. And he had just become a park ranger, law enforcement. He was able to carry a firearm. That was the minimum age limit at the time. There are positions, he said there were positions. He did work for the national park as a ranger, but he was unarmed when he turned 21. There were certain credentials and stuff that he had to go through, law enforcement tests and such. And boom, he is now a gun carrying or firearm carrying, fully law enforcement park ranger. So they would give him, he was the youngest, he was the furthest from the top of the totem pole. So any kind of job that none of the other rangers wanted, he was gifted. And he was told on this one particular day that apparently there was 3 girls and one of their friends out hiking. So 3 girls, 1 guy. And they had gone to go hike on the Middle Ridge South from Bridger, Teton National Park, and go up into the Grand Teton National Park. Apparently they were supposed to contact, one of the girls was supposed to contact their parents about 2 days behind schedule. So it was judged or told, hey, maybe they just went camping. Back then, it wasn't like what it is now. It was, yes, if there's someone missing, they're going to send people out. But now, in the last 10, 15 years, the Rangers have really stepped up. They've really taken more of an initiative, especially if anyone is missing. Now that, thanks to David Paulides, bringing the 411 to the world's attention, not just the national attention, but the world's attention. And, because of David Paulides, it was talked about on the Today Show. So people started to really pay attention and ask, hey, why are there so many missing people in national parks? So 26 years ago, it wasn't, it was a thing, but it wasn't like, hey, it was more or less maybe they're camping, maybe they just got partied a little too hard and whatnot. We'll go and check when we get some free time or whatever. So he's sent out to this Middle Ridge South, and he proceeds to show up. He realizes that they did not make it to the trailhead. There's a kind of sign in, and apparently they have hiked multiple times in this area. This isn't a new, fresh trip for them. So they usually sign in and, as kind of like, hey, we did this. We did it again. And so that was one of the first things he checked was when did they sign in on the trailhead? Because then he'll know if he has to go kind of north into the Grand Teton and then contact other rangers from then on, or if he had to go kind of to the southeast area and go where their campsite would have been. Strangely enough, in this valley, that is exactly where their campsite was. There's a little source of water there and some shade, safety. So he proceeds to find his way down into that area. And at this time, park rangers were not using side-by-sides like they do now. It was 99. They were using kind of like Honda four-wheel drive four-wheelers. And he proceeds to go towards this Dead Man Mountain. He's on the radio. He notifies the other park rangers or the main kind of park ranger station. Hey, these kids didn't show up to the sign-in sheet. Apparently the last person that had signed in was like 3 or 4 days prior. I'm gonna take a cruise down to where their campsite was supposed to be. So he gets to where their campsite would have been, and he starts to notice as he's on his four-wheeler, he starts to notice a little bit of kind of feelings of almost being watched. And that was strange because from the time he left the ranger station to when he got to Middle Ridge, nothing. There was no any kind of sense of dread, any kind of like, and it wasn't dread. I shouldn't have said that. It was a feeling of being watched. He didn't feel like he should not be in that area or he should leave immediately. It was, I feel like something's watching me. And that didn't happen until he was probably halfway to the halfway point between the two mountains. So about a quarter of the way to Dead Man Mountain. Now, he starts to notice that, I've got this feeling like it, but he's not afraid. He doesn't get that kind of feeling like he's going to be attacked or whatever. It's almost like he initially, in his own words, said, I almost thought it was a hazing. Because I didn't have the feeling of dread. Apparently, during some of their training to be a park ranger, they were told about certain psychiatric conditions or mental conditions that pop up when deep in the woods. And one of them, even if you are not being watched, is the feeling of being watched because you're so isolated, you're so far off away from the public, and for some reason your brain likes to kind of play games with you. Being that he doesn't have that feeling of dread because also a mental kind of condition as well is a sense of dread, even when something is not stalking you or watching you. It's just a natural reaction to being deep in the woods, alone. Usually it occurs when you're alone. And it is a real thing. I've had it happen to me a couple different times when I was up in the Adirondacks by myself. And, I've had it happen when there was something nearby, like the day that I was up there and I'm sitting on those boulders sharing a Washington State experience. I'll never forget it. And I felt like something was off. And the next thing I know, the woods just erupted in sound. Trees started getting smashed. I grabbed my camera and my bag and I started to run down the mountain. And as I looked over my shoulder, I could see something running away from me, thank God, but deeper into the mountains. The only thing I caught, unfortunately, was the sound of the forest just erupting in my panicked face. But so there is a real mental condition. He starts thinking about it like, all right, I don't have any kind of dread. It's just like, maybe the guys are messing with me. Maybe this is like my hazing. Some of the older park rangers, for some reason, didn't like him. And it wasn't because he was a wise ass. He was just, he was young. And apparently these guys felt like they were getting pushed out by a younger park ranger, more apt to learn and, really not stagnant in his job. He wanted to excel and perform. So he's like, maybe they're hazing me. And he stops his four-wheeler at that point. He remembers it distinctly like it was yesterday. He said, the second I thought maybe they're hazing me is when I stopped the wheeler. I turned it off. I took my helmet off and I kind of yelled out into the woods, hey guys, stop messing with me. I know it's you. And as he did that, he heard a scream for help. It wasn't a loud scream. It was almost as if someone hadn't drank water for a couple of days, was dehydrated and parched, kind of yelled out for help. And he kind of stops, looks around like, what the hell? He's like, all right, there's no female park rangers as of right now. And he proceeds to yell out, I heard you. Are you okay? He announces who he is, Park Ranger Patrick Blank. And he hears another voice again, another female voice scream for help. And he says, where are you? And she doesn't respond. Now, he thinks that it is truly, there is no coincidence as well, because if by chance he didn't have the feeling of being watched without that feeling of dread, he probably wouldn't have stopped his wheeler, thinking that it was the other guys just kind of hazing him and messing with him. So he gets off of his four-wheeler and, he, again, Park Ranger Patrick Blank, keep talking or keep yelling, and then he remembers the girls' names, and he says, one of their names, proceeds to go through the list of the names. Obviously, it's not the guy. It's, clearly a girl's voice. And finally, she responds with, it's me. And he can almost pinpoint where she is, so he kind of veers off into the woods off of this little trail. And he keeps telling her, hey, please keep responding. Please keep responding. For some reason, he clearly heard her voice at one angle, and then he hears her voice at a completely different angle, but still in the position he's traveling. So he was going kind of like a northeastern. He had to go now southeastern, and he gets onto another trail that he does not recognize. This is not the trail his four-wheeler is on, because once he steps out of the woods onto it, he looks around and he immediately thinks, all right, this is where we started. This is the trail that my four-wheeler is parked on. He looks behind him and it's not the trail. And he's like, huh. All right, well, I'll locate that shortly. Let's find this person who is in need of help. As he's walking, he comes to what was their campsite, and it is in tatters. There was 2 tents, apparently 2-person to a tent. So one of the girls had been dating one of the guy, or the only male camper. So 2 girls, guy and girl, in 1 tent. And the tents are destroyed. He couldn't at that point, as walking up on it, see if there was any kind of like markings or tears or whatnot. They were just, it looked like they had been trampled by, a group of people running through the woods. He yells out again, I found your campsite. Tell me where you are. He hears her again, and he then readdresses her name. Is this, because now he starts to realize that there is something off. And he wanted to make sure that this was her. He's not thinking anything other than they're all hurt. And maybe he misunderstood or whatnot. So he said, is this so-and-so? And she responds, yes, it is. I can hear you. And he said, all right. He said, I can hear you. You sound very close. And he kind of sees some movement just off to the peripheral. And he turns and he can see her. She's kind of nudged up or pushed into this kind of nook in this tree, where the roots are coming out, and she's just kind of wedged herself in there, almost in a very fearful position. The best way he described it was, he said it looked almost like when an animal is afraid, and a cat or a dog or whatnot, and they back themselves into a corner and they try to make themselves as small as possible. He said this is what this girl had looked like. She was actually, the group that he's looking for is older than him by like 4 or 5 years, each of them. And he runs over. Are you okay? He starts to, look at her, and he's like, hey, I'm here. We had gotten a report from the other girl's family saying that you guys were supposed to check in a couple days ago. Where's the 2 other girls in the mail? And what happened to your campsite? And she kind of freezes, and she says, the last I saw anyone was like a day ago, or a full day. So she had been by herself throughout an entire night. And it was the male of the bunch. He had gone and went to look for help. And he said, okay, well, my four-wheeler's back there. My radio's back there. I have water. Can you walk? Are you hurt? And she said, something's wrong. I twisted my ankle. And he looks at her ankle, and sure enough, her ankle was swollen and bruised and purple. And he's like, all right. He said, I'm gonna have you is your other ankle okay? We'll hobble back to where my four-wheeler is. I've got to get to the radio. I've got some supplies there, but I'm not going to leave you here. And it's not very far. So let's just get to where my four-wheeler is, and then we'll figure out how to find your friends. So they're hobbling back to the four-wheeler, and it's taking some time. And he says, what happened to your campsite? He's trying to figure out exactly where everything, what the damage was from and where everyone was. And it's slow going. He's practically carrying her as she's hobbling on one foot. She says that everything had been good. Everything was decent. That the first couple days they were out here, but then the boyfriend and his girlfriend started to say they were seeing things in the woods. They kept seeing something in the woods every time they would, go hike. If one of them had gone to the bathroom or whatever. So at that point, they had made the decision to buddy system. Always buddy system wherever you went. They couldn't figure out what they were seeing. They just said, it's not a feeling. It's we physically can see, but we cannot identify what we are seeing. It is rapidly moving away from us or rapidly moving in close to us to where we can't see. It's stopping just before we can make a visualization of what we are. It is definitely humanoid or bipedal, but we can't make out what it is. So the two girls, buddy system, boyfriend, girlfriend, buddy system. The night that they are set in the morning to go to the Middle Ridge South to go into Teton, is the night when the tents had been destroyed and the night everybody had gotten separated. So they had started to pack up their gear, get ready for their trip, because they had been in this one little camp spot for a couple days. And what they were doing was they were hiking. They'd hike up towards the Dead Man Mountain, the kind of their base, and then they were going to set another base up when they got to the Grand Teton. She says, so they're all set. They had cleaned up. The only thing that they had to do in the morning was take down their tents. Their bags had been packed. Obviously, they were going to change for the morning, into their hiking gear and then hike out. Pack the tents, boom, out. It was right around about an hour or two before they were going to head to bed. The guy and the girl had gone to get water for the fire, to put the fire out. And they came running back to their campsite, out of breath. She's crying. He's in hysterics, and he's saying, we just saw what we've been seeing, or we've been, what we thought we'd been seeing, but we physically now saw it, and we need to go. We need to go now. It's dark. It's 8, 9 o'clock at night. Because they're ready to go to bed. They've got to hike out, so they're not staying up till midnight. They're not partying. They're camping and hiking. So they kind of like, what do you mean we have to go now? It's dark out. If there's something out there, we should at least get the fire a little bigger, wait until daybreak and then head out. That way we know where we're going, what we're going to do. And eventually the guy calms down. He's adamant about leaving. He's just adamant. He finally realizes that, it's probably a stupid idea to leave in dark conditions. They have a couple flashlights, they more than a couple. Each of them had 2 flashlights with them for this trip. So a flashlight deep in a national park is not gonna do too much, especially in 1999. Now they're hobbling, they keep going back. They're on their way to the 4-wheeler, and she's kind of filling in the blanks of right now. And he realizes, like, oh shit. He's on that one trail. He's like, oh shit. My wheeler is just through these woods onto the trail. And he tells her, he's like, listen, I only found you because I heard you, but I realized that, my 4-wheeler is on an opposite trail of where we are now. We're going to have to go through these woods right here. And, I'm really going to have to support you, but, it's going to be hard going right now. It's going to hurt. And she goes, what do you mean, other trail? And he said, this isn't the trail that my 4-wheeler is parked on. He said, I got off my 4-wheeler. I said, I heard you yelling. I proceeded to call your name. And she said, yeah, I heard that. She goes, but there's no other trail. She goes, this is the main trail. And he's like, no. Woods are right here. And she goes, well, maybe I'm wrong. But her and her best friend, the other girl, her other buddy, they've hiked this area multiple times. This isn't their first excursion out here. This is their 5th or 6th time being out here. So she's kind of confused because she knows that there isn't another trail over there. But she's also confused because she's been without water, without any kind of food, without sleep, crouched in as small as possible into this little area of this little tree notch. And so she says, all right, maybe I'm confused. And they proceed to cut through the woods, and she keeps, filling in the blanks. They start the fire bigger, and as they are sitting around the fire, they kind of put their backs to where the tents are, and their tents were right next to each other. So they'd have kind of like something to fall back on, so nothing could get behind them. And even though it's a nylon tent, it's still better than nothing. They sit there, they got the fire going, and they start to hear this faint kind of growl over the fire, over the snap and kind of roar of that fire. And they see what they immediately knew were eyes. They were this kind of orangish yellow. They were not red and they were not yellow. They were more of like a kind of a golden orange color, more towards yellow though. They're watching these eyes, they're hearing this kind of growl, and it gets maybe 100 feet from the fire. staying in the perimeter of where the fire is. They cannot visually see what this is. They see eyes, they see a shape, and they realize that the boyfriend and girlfriend realize quickly that it is smaller than what they saw. And so they're watching it, and the guy kind of picks up this little rock and he threw it at this creature that is in the woods that they visually cannot see. That is 4.5, 5 feet off the ground. The rock kind of hits, it doesn't hit it. They can hear it hit the thud. It hits the ground in a thud. And immediately it's to its full height, somewhere between 7-8 feet in height. They watched it just raise right up. The boyfriend says, that's the same thing. That is the same thing. It's the same height. Oh my God. The girls all kind of start to break down and cry. And it just kind of walks along that kind of dark zone of that fire. And it's darker in there because that's where the shadows are cast, you know. And they're watching its eyes move back and forth as it kind of walks. Forward facing eyes. So this creature eventually had gotten bored or was just fed up with standing in the shadows and full on just ran. They watched it dropped to a quadruped position and just ran straight for the four of them. Now they are sitting pretty much elbow to elbow. Fire is in front of them, and it is just a dead sprint right towards them. They all immediately jump up and start to run in opposite directions. There was no buddy system. Worst mistake ever. As this thing's running, she said, they went one way, we went the other. She said, I don't know how we got split up because I was following her, I thought. She said, but I remember turning because I was behind my friend and I wanted to see if someone was behind me or wherever they were running. She said, and what this thing looked like was an exact image of what we know as a Dogman, but what she called was a werewolf. She described it, you know, this grayish black charcoal color, a large wolf-like muzzle, and that's pretty much what she could see. You know, she focused on those eyes, and if it was coming their way or if her friends were coming her way, what was going on. And it blasted through the fire. It didn't go around the fire. It didn't stop for the fire. It ran through the fire. There was debris and embers cast out of the fire pit, and it just plowed into the tents and proceeded to the two girls have now bolted. This thing, they could hear the tents just get mashed, and then they hear silence. She kind of whispers her friend's name because she realizes that her friend is nowhere in front of her. She can't see very well. One, the only source of light that they had readily available was that fire. Their flashlights were in their tent, one in their tent, one in their bag. And she whispers her friend's name. She cannot. There's no any response. She said at that point, I turned to see if maybe she was behind me, and I wanted to see where they were and where whatever this thing was, where it was. She said, so when I turned to look back at the camp, she said, I could immediately see the fire pit, and it was scattered, and there was embers kind of away from all of it, and it had just gotten pushed out. This thing just blew through. She could see a clear shot to that fire pit, their little tiny fire pit that they had built up. The tents are down. There's embers are on the tent. The tent is just, and she sees the eyes, or one eye, because they were forward-facing eyes. She sees kind of to her, full-on shot of this thing running peripheral to her. So she could see kind of a golden colored orange streak. That kind of half an eye she could see. And it was going after her two good friends. It wasn't like where the three girls were best friends and one of them met a guy and he was kind of the odd man out. They all knew each other for a very long time. They all went to school with each other. The girl that she was with actually was the newest part of their friend group. And she was like maybe 6-7 years into this friend group. So the other three had been friends all through school. Immediately, she just kind of falls to the ground and crouches down because she does not want to be seen. She realizes that now those two tents are demolished, that any kind of light is going to cast into where she may be. So she kind of gets down real low and starts to crawl towards this tree that she was later found in a couple days later. Now, at this point, he realizes that, or maybe even more into the story, I'm just going on what he shared with me, but at this point, he realizes that we've been hiking through these woods right here for 15 minutes, long enough for her to fill in a little more blanks. We should be out of the woods and onto that trail where my four-wheeler's parked. And he kind of stops her and he says, listen, he said, we should be on the trail by now. We should have been on it 10 minutes ago. We should have been on it a while ago. We're going to have to turn back to get onto the trail that, maybe you were right. Maybe you're right. Maybe I went off into the woods right after and circled back and jumped on the same trail. He's confused now because he's like, he knew damn well that he ran through a set of woods, but not very long, and then hit another trail. He said that when they were walking back, they turned and they walked maybe 3-4 minutes, and they were now connected back to the trail. He said, none of that. He said, that didn't make any sense. He said, now I'm getting freaked out. He said, because I've got one of the girls, she's hurt. I know damn well that I ran through a set of woods, then hit another trail, and then proceeded down that trail, came to a clearing, saw their tents, saw her. He said, so by the time now we're back on the trail, he said, I turned and looked, and there's the tents. Far enough away, but, we had made coverage But he's like, we walked 15 minutes. Jeff, we walked 15 minutes into those woods. He said, so I followed her advice. She said, initially she said, there's not 2 trails. We started to walk down that trail. Maybe 6 minutes into the walk, there's my 4-wheeler. He knows that trip that he had just made. He knows for a fact that he ran through a set of woods after leaving his 4-wheeler. There was no way possible that he didn't connect to, it was just an impossibility. They get to the 4-wheeler. He gets her set. He sits her down, kind of props her up, checks her ankle, gets a first aid kit out, kind of gives her some Tylenol, wraps her foot, gets on the radio. For the first maybe couple of minutes, there's no response. There's nothing except static. Nothing it's almost like it's not getting any signal, any kind of nothing. And they were highly rated walkie-talkie radio systems that they were using. Coverage was very good. He's within coverage zone. Finally, he gets a response from another one of the rangers saying, where you been? We got another team looking for you right now. Where are you? And he said, I'm right here. I believe the coordinates are. And he just immediately says, I believe that I'm somewhere probably midway to Deadman. And they said, all right, hang on. He hears over the radio them communicate with, or ranger station communicate with another group. Probably an hour goes by. They're stationary. They're told to sit where they were, that they believe they knew where they were. And they hear a noise coming, that vibrating 4-wheeler noise. Obviously, you know what a 4-wheeler sounds like. People know what 4-wheelers sound like. They can hear it coming, and that was one of the reasons why there was a lack of response on the radio was they were riding 4-wheelers. They were coming, doing the same thing he had been doing. They pull up and they assess the situation. Where are your friends? Are you okay? This and that. I'm good. What do you mean? Why are you guys being weird? And he pulls the guy up, he pulls Patrick up, the ranger, the one that actually had been giving him so much shit. And he says to him, listen, we've been trying to get in touch with you for 15, 16 hours. You haven't responded to us once. And he's taken back. Because he goes, no. He goes, what are you talking about? 15, 16 hours. He goes, I've only been gone for like 3 or 4 hours. And he goes, listen, did you fall? Did you hit your head? Did something happen to you? Because you've been gone this long. We have not been able to get in touch with you. This is the first contact we've had with you. And he's sitting there and he goes, if I've been gone 16 hours, then there should have been a night. There should have been a night. There was no night. And sure as shit, they radioed in and said, listen, like we might need, some sort of medical out here. We got to figure this out. He may not be able to ride out on his four-wheeler because he is now saying that he does not remember being out here for this long. He remembers being gone for 4 hours, a couple hours, not this long, 15, 16 hours. And at this point, he's in utter shock. He looks at her and says, how long have we been together? How long have I been with you? And she said, you just found me earlier. You just found me. Like 4 hours ago. There's been no night. There was nothing. Now, this is where I'm going to fill in the blanks with you guys tomorrow when I talk to him more, because 10 minutes into our conversation, or 10 minutes till our conversation ended, so 30 minutes in, he's like, I'm almost to the school. He goes, but listen, he's like, they brought us back to base camp, to the ranger station. He said, I was assessed. I thought for some reason that this guy was messing with me still. It was evident that, and it wasn't that the guy didn't like him. It was more or less hazing, busting of balls, And that's literally what Patrick thought was going on until they got to the main ranger station. And he was told, by his higher-ups that would not and have no reason to mess with him, that, listen, you have been gone. Did you fall? Did you crash your four-wheeler? What happened? How do you not remember? And he said, ask her. Go to the hospital and ask her. Because I looked at her out there and said, how long have I been with you? And he goes, this is weird. He goes, because I parked on another trail. He goes, and I walked through a set of woods and got to another trail. And that's when I found them, or her. That's when I found their campsite. I only was able to locate her. He said, there are 2 missing girls and 1 missing guy out there still. He goes, I don't know what happened. He goes, but I know, and I am adamant, and he's having a full-on conversation with his, the higher up, that there was no night. And no, I didn't look at the four-wheeler. There's no cracks, there's no any kind of damage. I'm not bleeding, I am coherent. So he's assessed and put on like a 2-day sabbatical or whatnot. Just take some time. Mental health downtime, physical health downtime. Take 2 days. He goes and checks on her, and she's like, literally saying everything that he remembers. You found me. We walked through the woods. We realized that there was no trail on that side of the woods. We walked back to the trail. We looked, saw the campsite. We knew we were okay at that point. And we sat here. There was no night. So at this point, he goes, I'm just going to quit. I'll fill in the details tomorrow with you. He said, but I'm almost to the school. Needless to say, 3 days later, that group of rangers, along with him, all had kind of fanned out around their campsite, and they later found one of the other girls, the girlfriend, alive. She was very mentally damaged, like mentally just a wreck. Not damaged, mentally a wreck. Physically, she was very bad off from exposure, lack of water, lack of food. Her boyfriend was found in a tree, lumped over a branch, almost like someone would hang a rug over a clothesline or whatever, a towel. Almost when it fit those pictures that people talk about when a large predator suspends a person in a tree, or not a person, a animal, its kill in a tree. The third girl, her friend, her hiking buddy, was never located. Her body was never, ever located. To this day, Patrick is adamant that there's a day missing in his life that he will never get back. For some reason, he does not recall. She didn't recall. He was later told by higher ups to stay away from her and not talk to her, because now there's a full-on investigation, and a missing girl. Just don't talk to her. Stay away from her, or you will possibly lose your career as being a park ranger. He then says, "Listen, I gotta let you go. Definitely talk to you tomorrow on this, but as of right now, I don't recall that missing day. I don't recall." He goes, "I still believe that I was on a different trail." He goes, "I don't know what happened from walking into those woods and hitting the camping trail, finding her walking into the woods that he had come through, realizing it's too far, turns around, boom, everything's right there. None of it makes sense. How is she and the other girl still alive? He's not, and she was never found. There's more to his story and what he looked like. Obviously, she and him had talked a little bit about more of what happened, but he knows what happened to him via what they found and how they found it. He never spoke to her after that second trip into the hospital where he talked to her and then was told to immediately leave. He was threatened for almost 2 years to never open his mouth about this. He was threatened by other members of the park ranger community that he worked for and worked with. His boss proceeded to tell him that, and he then, right after this experience, he did move away from Wyoming, his home state, but he knew that if he had stayed, he probably wouldn't nothing would have worked out for him. So he probably wouldn't have had his job. He probably would have been threatened for the rest of his career. So he only did the logical thing. Go. You got people telling you that you are in trouble for talking with the victim. you're missing hours, practically a whole entire day. And the trail. So he'll fill us in tomorrow. Just some chilling details on this experience. Now let's jump into part 2. Yesterday's upload was a gentleman named Patrick, and he and I spoke the previous day for about 40 minutes, 10 give or so minutes while he was at his house. And then he kind of lost track of time, and he's like, listen, we can finish this conversation tomorrow, or I can give you some information on my ride to get my kids, which will take a half an hour. But we'll have to cut it short, and then we can finish it up the next day. And I said, whatever you want to do. Honestly, I'm not, questioning anything. I can share experiences. It's up to you. And he said, all right, let's do this. And so we did. And his experience, he was a park ranger. He had, at the age of 21, completed his certification to be able to carry a firearm park ranger, law enforcement officer, park ranger / whatever. And he had previously worked for the parks department from the time he was 18 years old. So he was not a newbie, but he was still kind of the low man on the totem pole. Lincoln County, Wyoming. And he was in an area, not the Grand Teton, but he was actually in the Bridger-Teton National Park, which is just south of the Grand Teton National Park. Now, there are 2 mountains that are in this area that he had to go to. He was sent on kind of a welfare check. There was 3 female campers / hikers and 1 male, boyfriend, girlfriend, 2 best friends. And so he was, apparently what was supposed to happen was these kids were camping in kind of this valleyed area between Dead Man Mountain and Middle Ridge South. For a few days they spent traversing Dead Man Mountain area, and their plan, which they had given their whole kind of itinerary to their family, this is what we're going to do. One of the girls was supposed to contact her family on a certain day when they got to Middle Ridge South or got into the Grand Teton area. And this all occurred in 1999. So pre-cell phones like we have now. And the family called. Being the low man on the totem pole, he was sent out almost kind of like a welfare check to check and see where these kids were. They were older than him by a couple of years. And so he jumped on a 4-wheeler, one of those 4x4 4-wheelers. This is like pre side-by-sides like we have now and such. So, a Honda Big Red with racks in the front, racks in the back is typically what Rangers used. Anything 4-wheel drive, usually shaft driven. Jumps on that, got his gear with him, and heads out. Gets to a location where he knew roughly the coordinates of where the kids would be. And I keep saying kids even though they were older than him because they were in their 20s at the time. So they were kids compared to myself and him now. So he gets off of his four-wheeler. He had, from the time he had gotten into a little bit after the Middle Ridge South, he had a feeling of like he was being watched. Not the kind of dread feeling, but something like something was off, something was watching him. He didn't feel like he was in danger yet. He proceeds to drive onto one of these little trails, park ranger accessible trails. And he ends up stopping the four-wheeler because he did, at this point, he started to get that overwhelming feeling of being watched with a little bit of dread. He jumps off the wheeler. He hears a scream. A female screaming, "Help me, help me." And he kind of sat for a moment and listened because he had just gotten off this four-wheeler. He had been riding for an hour. Hang on one second. I gotta let the mascot in. So he hears this scream and he proceeds to, he responds, hang on. He actually notifies or responds with, his name, and I'm a park ranger. Continue to speak so I can hear you. Are you okay? Are you one of these three girls? Obviously, you could tell it was not one of the guys because it's definitely a female screaming. As he's standing on the trail, he kind of thinks about where, and this is something that has baffled him. This whole, the 40-minute conversation was, the majority of it was centered around the one part, and he purposely looked at the comment section yesterday to see if anyone had any kind of response on what, and a few of you did, and a few of you agreed or had the same idea I had, and he had as well. So he starts to walk through this set of woods, and he's not very long, a couple of minutes. He can hear her voice getting closer, and he kind of cuts and cuts, but not enough. He never V'd. That's the key, most important part. He never kind of arced back to the trail. He was going kind of at a diagonal, but still had to go around some obstacles in the woods, came to another trail. And he looks this way, looks that way, gets his kind of bearings, hears her, starts to look and proceed down, sees their campsite off to the side, and sees that there's two tents, and what appears to be some packs. Not a lot, not a very large campsite at all. And he continues to follow her voice. He sees her. She is tucked into this kind of notch or like little just small area of this kind of V shape in this tree. And she's made herself very small. She is dehydrated. She is hungry. She is lacking sleep. She also has an ankle that is very large and purple. He runs over. He, gives her some water. And he proceeds to talk to her and say, what in all happened? Can you fill me in on everything? And this is where everything kind of just really got strange for him. So they proceed, he helps her up. And I'm not going to go too much into detail on the account with them. If you want to hear it, you can listen to yesterday's upload. They were savagely, like, they were attacked. As they are walking, as Patrick is walking this young lady out of the woods, helping her, might hear some sirens in a moment, but he's got her all her weight on him as he's walking. They walk down the trail. They walk into the woods to get to the four-wheeler. She fills him in on where her friends are. She doesn't know. They have an entire conversation. And he realizes that, holy shit, we've been hiking on this little patch of woods that only took me 3 or 4 minutes to get through the first time. Something like a half an hour. And he looks at her and he says, the other trail should be here. He's like, we've been like hiking for way too long. And at that point, he's now kind of trying to figure out, like, did something happen? So they make the decision to turn back around and get back to the trail that they just left. She finishes the story on how or what had occurred. This large creature that kind of stalked them for what seemed like forever, had them pinned down in their campsite. Their tents were together. They had a fire pit in front of them. So they had put the tents kind of together as a precaution, 3 young ladies, 1 guy, on a remote, isolated area. So it was done out of safety, and it was actually a wise decision because nothing could get behind them the night that kind of shit hit the fan. So this creature had pushed them, or had kind of trapped them, and it kept proceeding to come into their camp, and they had to take off running. She had lost her friend. Anyway, they eventually get back to the trail, and they get to the wheeler. And he gets her propped up, gets his first aid kit out. And he's adamantly thinking about how none of this is adding up. Like, not her story and not the occurrence of what happened to them, but what he is experiencing. Like, this trek of woods. They turned around. He knew for a fact that he walked through a small set of woods between 2 trails. And then they turn around and boop, there's the wheeler. Boop, there's the campsite. And he's just in utter shock. But he's like, I need to take care of this girl and make sure she's all right. So he, gets out their first aid, bandages her leg, isolates it, kind of splints it, gives her some Tylenol. And at this point, he hears some, they waited for a little bit of time had passed. And they hear a 4-wheeler or one or 2 4-wheelers coming into the trail. And he sees that it's his coworkers. Now, this whole time, he had a park ranger who was messing with him, kind of hazing him. And that's what he was thinking, like, this is some sort of hazing. Maybe there isn't 3 missing people. Obviously she's hurt, but he can't make any sense of any of this, because When they get off the four-wheelers and start to approach and talk to him, there was a large gap of time between what happened, him leaving the main park ranger station to getting to her. Not very long. A couple of hours. Finding her, the walk, preparing everything, and then them showing up. He realized that 13 to 14 hours had passed. An entire night had passed. He looks at her and he adamantly says, how long? Because he had talked to the other park rangers and he's talking about a different trail. None of this is making sense. He's like, there's a trail here. There isn't the trail. I don't know what happened. I can't make sense of this. They tell him, hey, you've been out here all night. And he's like, no night. There was no night. There was nothing. There was 4 hours. Her and I had been together. No any kind of night. At that point, he and I ended up letting each other go. So, there is one living right now and one missing, 2 found. That's where he ended it. The not boyfriend and girlfriend, but the boyfriend and her best friend were found. The girlfriend was missing. And during all of his explaining what happened on that night, there was a couple of things that I wasn't sure of. And that's what I'm going to fill in with you guys right now. I'm going to fill in the search and rescue part. He was actually, when he got back to the main park ranger station, they had taken him to the hospital and did an assessment on him because he almost seemed like he was speaking crazy, adamant about there was no night. So they were just, maybe he had crashed the four-wheeler, something. They couldn't figure out why he didn't understand that there was a large gap of time and not just a short gap of time. So this is technically kind of what I shared with you, a brief. But like I said, if you want to hear about that experience, you can go back and listen to yesterday's. This is the rest of the experience that he shared with me that really changed his life and his view on the world that he thought he knew. So this is what occurred during the search and recovery for the other 3. This is all, the majority of it is secondhand information that he had gotten from his fellow park rangers because he was not part of the search and recovery. If you're wondering why I'm looking up at my ceiling, one of those centipedes, those walking eyebrows, is right on my ceiling right now. Oh my God, I hate those things, but they kill bugs. So I guess what occurred was they had rescued her and him. He's out for 2 days. When they come back, they now know that they have 3 missing campers/hikers. 2 female, 1 male. They find the male. The male is draped over a branch like 40 feet in the air. A large tree, and he's kind of draped over it like you would kind of hang a blanket. The not so normal part, or actually none of it's normal, I shouldn't even say not, is he was, when they found him, and they only found him because they kept hearing like a kind of creaking of the branches when they get close to the trees. They weren't looking up for some reason. They weren't looking, which is strange because you think park rangers would be taught to always kind of be vigilant of your surroundings, and that is even above you. You know, I know when I go hiking that I keep looking around. I try to watch all of the area. That's how I had seen that one tree when I was up where Tom Mezek disappeared just recently, where there were claw marks all the way up this tree. It stopped maybe 20 feet up, and then more. So you have to be vigilant of what is around you. And that just doesn't mean around you or on the ground. That means above you. Because even if it's not a cryptid, it could be a large cat. It could be a bobcat. It could be a lynx. It could be a mountain lion. Hell, even bears climb trees, you know? So they find him, and he is draped on this branch. They kind of are looking at him, and it doesn't dawn on them until this is that he is not draped, like stomach touching the tree. His back is arched on the tree. So he's in a U-shaped position, kind of like The Exorcist, when the Exorcist girl walks upside down in like that U shape. They're trying to figure out how to get him down. They're like, but it doesn't dawn on them until a few minutes into it, and they realize, holy shit, he's kind of upside down. His spine is broken. They kind of shimmy up the tree. They realize they can't. They send one of the rangers back to the park ranger station and have him get a extension ladder. The main ranger in charge, actually, when he is told what the predicament was, they brought down 2 ladders and some planks, and they ended up getting up there, and they realized that he was, even though his body was draped over this, or what they thought was over this branch, his body was pierced through. So almost like the stick, so his body, this is the branch, and like this is his body, like it was pierced through. So it was going through his stomach area. And once they realize that, they're kind of like, all right, we got to cut him out. We got to cut him down, because how else are we gonna, And then they realize, so they don't realize there's a lot to this, because they don't realize that he's in that U-shaped upside down position. But when they do, they're in shock. And then when they realize that the end of the branch has more branches and more leaves, and so there is no physical possible way of him being skewered like that. There's also not a lot of blood on the ground. This is, once again, he got all of this information from the guy he thought was razzing him and hazing him. They ended up becoming really good friends. Actually, after this, they did. And another ranger that he was pretty close with prior to this, there was not a lot of blood, which there should have been, a shit ton, especially if he was pierced, the way his body was positioned. But how did this occur? It's not like you can unscrew the branch and put it through and screw it back on. No. So, strange thing one, right? They realize that they have to cut the branch down. And out of respect, but more so out of kind of a medical examiner's view, we can't just cut the branch and let him drop. So what they did was they almost made like a pulley system. They tied 2 ropes onto the branch, drooped it over another branch, kind of made a pulley. So after that branch was cut from the tree, it just wouldn't crash down. So they had 3 or 4 rangers down guiding those 2 ropes. When they do, and eventually get him off of that, they cut the branch, so he was transported with like a chunk of wood in him. His back was not broken. His position, any person of any kind of common sense would immediately think, hey, his back's broken. He's, how the hell did this happen? But no. He was somehow draped and skewered onto a large branch. So they get him down. A few of the guys are shook by now. They're kind of like, what the hell? A few of them are looking around like there was a lot of fear. And almost like an unexplained, the way he was told by the older gentleman or the older ranger that was razzing him it was almost like the woods didn't want us there. It was almost like something in those woods was, one, we felt like we were being watched the whole time they were out there. And 2, when they were trying to get him down and manipulate the branch and try to do they were under the impression that any time or any moment something was going to come out of the woods at any random spot and attack them. And at this point, there's not too many park rangers on staff right there. There's maybe 6. So they secure him onto a 4-wheeler. They bring his body back they put him in a body bag, drag him with like one of those sleds behind the 4-wheeler. His body didn't touch the ground. There was no disrespect. Key thing, and that was one of the things he said, like, this was done with the utmost respect, and all of the rules, all of the, everything was followed to the letter. All the T's were crossed, I's were dotted. That's why they made the pulley system and didn't let him drop. Because if they had let him drop, here's the thing. If they had let him drop, and Patrick said this, they probably wouldn't have known that his back was not broke, because it probably would have broke from that drop. His body would have just, smashed from a 40-foot drop with a branch skewering his lower area of his stomach. Now, the next job is to find the other 2 missing girls. all of this is getting transmitted back to the ranger station. Some more rangers are coming out. They started calling in. And it was almost done in-house until once they brought the body back and medical examiner was contacted, then the police had to come and get involved because there's a body in unusual circumstances. So now you have from 5 or 6 rangers, now there's about 20 law enforcement officers out there, including the park rangers. So during all of this, they had asked the young lady that was found by Patrick, well, she's in the hospital recovering. They're trying to kind of get any kind of information from her that they can gather. She's obviously in shock, dehydrated. She's in not very great condition, but alive. And they're like, who they did not tell her about her friend until later on. She found out later on, but who was the last person when you and your friend took off running? What was the last thing you saw of her? Because she had explained how, and she let them know, she didn't, not just Patrick, but she told them that they were trapped by this creature. This very strange, orangish, golden-eyed creature. And it ran through the fire at them, and that's when they took off running. 2 went that way, 2 went that way, and into the woods. They automatically assumed, because when she had said, my best friend, we ran that way, and the boyfriend and girlfriend, they ran that way. But she lost her best friend. She, at one point, stopped and looked and could not locate her friend and made herself as small as possible. The next thing she kind of remembers of that night was the boyfriend's girlfriend, her other very good friend, finding her. And because she had been walking, she almost walked past the girl, the girl that was hurt. And she had whispered her name when she realized that it was her. Because she's looking for this eye shine. Her friend stops and looks at her and says, gets low to her. And says, what's her name? And I'm saying what's her name because he specifically asked me not to share any of their names. And where is my boyfriend? Have you seen him? And she's like, I haven't seen anyone for quite some time now. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes into whatever just happened, And she tries to help her up. She doesn't realize that her leg is messed up, her friend. And she lets out this kind of pained screech. And the girl immediately kind of lets go and goes, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Oh, Jesus, it's right above me now. How did it get above me? Hang on, I gotta hit pause." All right, sorry about that. That thing was over there, and then it was above me, and I used canned air to get it over there, and it landed on the Bigfoot. I grabbed the Bigfoot and tossed it out into the hallway, so it's not dead, so it can still do its job, killing other little bugs, but at least it's not going to bother me. So I hate those centipede things, man. They are so terrifying. And yeah. So that I'm so sorry. I will go in the woods hiking in an area where Tom Messick disappeared by myself. But I am petrified of centipedes, those little walking eyebrows. Anyway. She tells them what occurred. She lets out this kind of screech. And immediately she kind of just drops down again and gets into that fetal bald position. And they hear this just kind of weird growling, almost like a yell. Like this just a really strange kind of guttural sound. It wasn't like a dog. It was not a scream. He can't explain it because he didn't hear that night, you know, so he's just going off of what she said. And her friend takes off running and just says, "I'm sorry," and leaves her. And for the rest of the time, that's where she is. She didn't hear any other noise that whole time except for when Patrick came up with the four-wheeler. That was the first, and basic woodsy noise. They never found her body. They had kind of fanned out, did almost a basic grid search 20-something years ago. Technology wasn't what it is now. So you are mapping things out and such. You can't, there was no computer program like we have nowadays. They ended up locating her a couple days into this search and recovery. And she was a mile, almost going towards Grand Teton, or Teton. And when they found her, she was lying on her stomach, face down in the dirt, and her arms were sprawled out. This is what Patrick had told me. She never witnessed this. Like, he never heard the noise that he only went off of what she told him about that noise. Because he's actually still in contact with her to this day. They became friends. And when she was found, they ran up, kind of flipped her over, and there was no any kind of damage to her. Her face was, her eyes were closed, her mouth was closed. She was just sprawled out face first like that. There was no claw marks. There were no bites. It was almost as if she died from exposure. Later to find out she had a coronary, she had a heart attack. These kids were not that old. They were only a couple years older than Patrick at the time. So 25, 26. Not coronary, quality age, so there was no any kind of physical damage to her. They proceeded to look for almost 3 weeks, the rest of the search and recovery, and never found the other girl. So when all of this is going on, Patrick remembers he was grilled by, and this is interesting because this right here made me start to make sense of some things that I've questioned for a while now. Because like in the Tom Messick case, I said, why did the FBI get involved? I've asked state police. I've asked family members that were involved in this, in the Mezek case, that were law enforcement, and no one knows. Or if they did know, they aren't saying. But he was questioned extensively by the FBI. Their questions centered around not what she said about this strange events of being attacked by whatever this was, but the loss of time. Your trip, when you got off that trail and went into the woods, and then you realized that you had been hiking for half an hour, what was that whole, how did you feel? Did you feel this? Did you feel like you were being watched? Did you feel a sense of dread? Did you feel hopelessness? Did you, did you hear anything? Any kind of strange noise that would be out of the ordinary for being that far into the deep wilderness. So now, Patrick and I talked about this a little bit. Possibly the reason why the FBI gets involved on these cases, and only a select few, when some sort of rift or portal is opened. Not that they can do anything about it, but almost so they can record it. Not like record like with a camera or anything, but like record and report on it to their higher ups. Because, what are they going to, how are they going to close a portal down? They're just human beings. They're the FBI, but they are a basic Joe, Compared to a portal, they are a basic Joe. Compared to the supernatural, the paranormal, the high strangeness, cryptids, they are nothing. To us, they are FBI agents with badges and guns and the ability to take our freedom. But to so they are only there to record and report. And then, vámonos. Which is exactly what happened in the Tom Mezek case. Exactly what happened in that case. And then he says, Jeff, now that we are talking about this is after we were talking for a while today, or yesterday. I'm recording this, obviously. Now that you know what I just shared with you, he said, doesn't it make sense of why the FBI was up where Tom Mezek disappeared? And how very quickly they came in, didn't do much, interviewed the people that were with Tom, talked to a few people that had been in the woods on the search and rescue for Tom Mezek, but then left. Record and report. Metallic sound was heard when Tom Mezek was out in those woods by a family member. I have physically recorded on video on my channel, the metallic sounds on the day Tom Mezek disappeared, November 15th, 2024. I have that on my channel. 9 years to the day. So he then asked the girl, Did you hear? What did you hear? Did you hear? When she found out that the guy friend was only like 40 feet, 50 feet from where she was, but in the air, she never heard a scream, any kind of noise from that. And you'd think that even if there was a possibility or a way of being skewered by a branch and having that branch reconnected to that, because there's no way it could have just, there's no way of him being in that position. It is impossible. But yet it happened. He and I talked about that for quite some time. But at the end of it all, they never find the other girl. To me, the experience that these kids experienced that night, the night of, with whatever, if it was a Dogman, some sort of demonic creature from wherever, some sort of portal. Yes, that's the thing that gets me the most, is the fact that how in God's name did whatever happened to that young man happen. To me, that's the biggest mystery and the most strangest part of the event. He was questioned. He had gone back to work, and periodically he would be brought into an office and by his higher ups and asked questions about years later about anything that occurred that he didn't remember, but now he's remembering. He does not work for the parks department. He's not a park ranger anymore. He was for quite some time. But then as he started getting older, he decided that, I can't do this anymore. It was a career that he loved, but the politics of it was what got him, not this event, the politics of it all. He has no fear of sharing this. He actually asked the girl or woman before even reaching out to me if he was, and the key thing was, don't share her name, share my name, don't share her name or the other three, please. And at the end of it all, the FBI just kind of let it be. They were more focused on that time, the time of walking. What did you hear? What did you see? What did you feel? Did she say anything to you about anything other than do you remember any of those hours that you lost? And as time has gone by, he does remember that at one point on their walk into the woods to find that first trail that's not there, but when they had turned around, he had thought that he had seen a bright light, like the sky kind of lit up quick and then back to normal. He has since asked her. She doesn't remember that. She has the same kind of time frame that he has still to this day, but he has these kind of offshoot moments of there was some darkness, maybe there was, but he doesn't know if it was if that is true, or if it is, if he got caught in a portal. I think, and he thinks that he didn't go into a portal, but if a portal opens and there's enough energy pushed out from this portal, could it affect time around it? And that's relativity, whatnot. And yes, it could. Theoretically, it could. But he just doesn't know. Like he's like, when we were walking, he's like, I have a feeling that yes, it was dark for, some time as we had turned around, but I don't have, it's like a beginning of a story, or maybe like 30 seconds into a 2-hour movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's just there. So, unfortunately, Patrick, unless he decides to do, what is that called? Hypnosis. My brain shut off because there's an alarm system going off right now. I think someone broke into the synagogue diagonally from my house. He's contemplated on doing hypnosis, but part of him doesn't want to because he doesn't think he wants to remember exactly what happened. And he's afraid that if he does do hypnosis, that these memories will flood back in and really cause him some severe mental pain and such. But if he does, he said, if I do it, he said, and you're still a channel, he goes, because I'm not doing it tomorrow. He said, I'm probably not going to do it in a year. He said, but if I ever do it, it'll be, within the next 5 years. If I do it and you're still a channel, he goes, I will let you know. He said, or if I have any kind of remember or memory come flooding back, he goes, I will let you know. She, to this day, is adamant that what they saw was, and she listens to YouTube channels. She watches like the Josh Gates exploration and such. She's convinced that she saw that creature was a Dogman. For the longest time, she thought Bigfoot. But then when the knowledge of Dogman and people talking about it came, to a head, she then realized that sounds much more similar to what we saw than a Bigfoot. Now, I did a little background on this region, and there was a lot of Native American lore, a lot of Native American spirituality, a lot of battles between different tribes, different nations, and some very strange kind of goings-ons in the 1800s up until present day, we may never know what happened. My whole thing of this is, and Patrick and I started to talk about this. I almost didn't bring this up, but what if this may sound far-fetched or stupid, or like just a stupid theory, but what if whatever that thing was came out of a portal, right? Let's say it is a Dogman, and it came out of a portal, and everything kind of just shifted. The time, relativity, everything just shifted for moments. What if, like the Eldritch and the Philadelphia experiment, when that when the Eldritch reappeared and there were supposed men like stuck in the hall, like hanging half out, screaming. What if he had gotten caught through something, got transported, and that's how he was, or when he came back to this time and physical area is where he was. And that's how he was. Like, just, that's the only thing. He and I talked a little bit about that. He never thought about it. For some reason, I started to think about it because of my fascination with these portals. On the live stream, someone asked, what's the percentage of Dogman missing 411s? And, you know, like I said in that live stream, I said a long time ago, I would have said 80%. I literally would have said 80%. And meant it. But that's so high and so not even realistic. It's like maybe 5%, maybe, and that's high. But, you know, I'd have to agree with the man that brought the 411 to the world's eye, you know, that there is something much stranger going on in these national parks, in our forests. Heck, not even in just America's, in worldwide. There is so many events happening that if you really think about it, it almost makes Bigfoot and Dogman look tame. We have things that are going on this planet that we couldn't even fathom, and that's scary. That's really scary. Right there, that quick pause is why I'm envious of him taking a half an hour. He lives so far out that he's got to drive a half an hour to bring his kids to school every day. Or it's even, you know, going to the grocery mart. Just right there. It's 2:30 in the morning and people are yelling on my street. And I live in the Adirondacks. You know? How strange is that? Not cool. Anyway, yeah, there's so much going on that we can't even understand. I know that when I heard that metallic noise where Tom Messick disappeared and I captured it, I didn't think I was going to be able to capture it. And it's in the video. I literally am talking to you guys and I'm saying, guys, I don't know if you can hear this, or if my mic's going to even be able to pick it up. But there's a metallic noise out here. And it was just the strangest thing. And I know people have heard it on those videos because it's, I mean, if that's not enough to make people realize that there is so much more going on than what we know. All right, folks, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Just some absolutely horrific experience right there. Guys, I also hope to see you tonight at the live stream, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time once more. And with that, thank you for supporting this channel. It is your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, Never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.